Welcome and bienvenidos to our new program called Next Generation, highlighting the many creative journeys of next generation leaders. In this series, I will bring you the stories of young leaders in science, literature, medicine, education, and business. Those who have chosen to reach further, travel farther, innovate, and take the risks often necessary to make a difference in their own lives, in those of their families, their communities, and someday in the world. My name is Julieta Garcia. For over 22 years, I had the great privilege of serving as president of the University of Texas at Brownsville. Through that work, I came to know the stories of many of our students that overcame great obstacles to attend college and through great sacrifice of their own and of their families, make it through. Getting to know their stories was always a great inspiration to me. So I thought I'd chase some of them down, interview them, and let you hear in their own words what they're up to now, what their challenges were, and what they hope to accomplish in the future. I promise you will be as inspired, amazed, and humbled by their accomplishments as I have been. Now let's get started. Buenos dias. Good morning. It is so wonderful to have an opportunity today to be interviewing a city commissioner, Nurith Galonsky. But what you're going to discover today is that she's much more than a city commissioner. We're going to talk about Nurith's background, about her love of learning, obviously, and her love of public service, and try and understand where the origins for that come from, what she thinks are most important about the issues that our community faces. And then we'll ask her for some consejos for future students as they're beginning to think through their own educational trajectories. So, Commissioner Galonsky, bienvenida. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. It's very important in our series here to begin to understand the leaders in our community today, people who have made the decision to jump into the arena very actively, to pursue office, to take all of the experiences that they've enjoyed and had in their own lifetimes, and to try to apply those for the common good. So thank you first. I don't want to forget to thank you on behalf of our community for making that decision. Very important to us.
Thank you. It's been a learning experience and actually a very enjoyable one, too.
So tell us, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit, before I get into your public service, tell us a little bit about your own educational background.
So I graduated from high school here in I was born and raised here in Brownsville. I went to different elementary schools, but I graduated from St. Joseph Academy in 1992. And so from there, I ended up going to Stanford. But I'd like to tell the story about how I ended up at Stanford.
Okay.
Because my heart was set on going to Harvard, and I applied early action, but I got declined. And so for me, it was like a bit a moral, or like it just broke me down. But I had applied to a whole bunch of others, schools, regular
Which
action.
is an important thing to consejo already, right, to give to students. Don't apply just to one place.
No.
Yes.
And hopefully colleges are making it more affordable so that you can
Yes.
Apply to different schools. I think I ended up either 8 or 9 schools. And I got accepted into all of them except for Harvard. But it's funny. That's
Their loss.
Yeah. But I think things work out the way they're supposed to work out. And when it came down to making the decision for college, neither one of my parents went to high school. And so I remember my father asked Brother Francis, who was the principal at St. Joe then, okay, so her top 2 choices are Stanford or Brown. I had gone the previous summer to visit Brown, just, like for an afternoon that my mother had
Tell us where Brown is.
Brown is in Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, so northeast.
Yes. And so obviously I always had my mind, I'd go somewhere in New England because 2 summers I had spent at Cornell University.
Okay.
But my father went to the principal of my high school then and asked which one did he recommend. I'd never visited Stanford. And actually, the reason I even applied to Stanford was because Dr. Joe Sabareta told me. I don't even know if I knew Stanford existed before he suggested it. So Brother Francis told my father, I think Stanford's the best option.
So Stanford is often called Harvard of the West, right? Because it has notoriety like Harvard?
I get, or now I think it's in a league of its own. I went to visit actually at the end of January. It's so different than when I was there 20 some, oh geez, almost 30 years ago. Yikes. Yeah. But, and the interesting thing is it's supposedly the class that's above me, the class of 1995, because I'm class of 1996, that became the dot-commers that set the precedent. So,
So Stanford is located where?
Palo Alto, California.
Right in the middle of?
Between San Francisco and San Jose.
Yes, and where all the technology center is, the Silicon Valley.
And if anyone knows me, I'm not technology inclined. So I was there, to have my world opened to something new, but I was not going down that route. And that's why I ended up applying to law school, because when I finished my undergraduate, my mother, who's the one who makes these decisions, she goes, either you're
truth be told.
Yeah, she's little, but she makes herself known. So she said, either you work or you continue to go to school. And
that's easy.
Well, I didn't feel I had marketable skills because I was not a programmer and not good at it at all.
Now, Stanford offers many degree programs. It's not
Correct.
all tech related, right? And you were a liberal arts major.
Correct.
In essence. And you majored in what?
In international relations and Spanish literature. I ended up double majoring because I was already fluent in Spanish. I had a friend my freshman year suggest that I take Spanish classes. And I started taking literature classes. I think it was the spring quarter of my freshman year. So it was very easy to start accumulating the credits for a double major. And I liked it because I even started a Latin American Studies master's program. But I ended up not finishing it so that I could take some time off before starting law school. But,
So you went back to law school, having already achieved your first degree in international relations and Spanish literature, because you felt you wanted a more marketable. What does that mean? Tell our students what.
Well, back then the whole internet stuff was just taking off, and because of my surroundings in California, it seemed that if I didn't know how to program, I wasn't really equipped or I wasn't equipped to get a well-paying job. And as it was already pretty expensive to live there. Not as expensive as it is now. Yeah. But I just, I didn't think that was feasible for me. And
then why law then?
I always knew about law school. I just didn't know when. Being the oldest, I'm the oldest of two daughters. I think there were certain expectations of me. I also knew eventually that I needed to have some sort of business knowledge because of my family's business here. So in undergraduate, I didn't really focus on that. And my mother, who's the loudest voice between my parents, she always said, you have to know how to defend what you have. And for me, I've always enjoyed words, even though I was pretty good at math, like simple math and stuff. But I like words. I like argument, not necessarily arguing, but being able to persuade someone, being able to convey your argument, being able to express yourself. Because the longer I live, the more I find out that people have limited vocabularies or some sort of difficulty really expressing what they want to say or what they're thinking.
What they feel first, right?
Correct.
What their concerns are, and then how to help them or interpret that into some sort of action. They're often mad, but you're not sure why. You don't even know how to help them if they can't articulate it. Now, you mentioned two words that were very interesting to me. You mentioned defend what we have, and then also I saw woven into your work advocacy. And so you think of lawyers as being the mouthpiece, right? The person who has words, who has ways of being able to order an argument in a persuasive manner, and so to defend what you have or to grow a business. And so law seemed to you then to be an appropriate next step of preparation.
And it's actually something that I recommend to everyone because it is a skill that comes into practice every day. I've had friends and classmates who went through law school but then chose not to practice. Either they didn't take the bar exam, or they did take the bar exam but then decide for themselves that that's not something that they want to pursue long term. But it comes into play in your everyday life all the time.
How is that?
Even if it's as simple as, getting stopped for speeding, or reading a contract, or knowing your rights. Mm-hmm. What they teach you in law school really is a way of thinking, mm-hmm. and expressing yourself, mm-hmm. as well. So that's, at any moment during your day, that's basically what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I see, especially in our community, so many people who can't defend themselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
this is obviously very important to you, and an advocacy that you learn in law school does teach you how to order your thoughts, how to provide proof underneath them, ethos, pathos, and logos. I'm sure you learned in law school, and then how to express an action or a way of being. And so you have discovered that from your work already, that people in our community often, it's not that they lack voice. They know what they need. They lack a way to communicate it, mm-hmm. in an effective manner. Mm-hmm. And so you have seen yourself as the person, perhaps, that can help them do that. Is that right?
Yes.
But maybe more.
Or they don't know how to, because of limited experience or education. Really, it really boils down to education. And even, for example, a few weeks ago, we had a city commission meeting where it was a request to change zoning, right? It's a group that owns a big piece of land that they want to make apartments. And so they wanted to increase the density so that they could put more apartments in the building. So this was probably the third time we had heard this request. Every time there were residents from the surrounding community showing up in protest of this change, because they live in single-family homes. And so the idea of having apartments
would change the nature of their environment,
of their neighborhood, yes. Yeah. And they were concerned about the traffic. And so I remember this lady standing up to make her public comment. It probably took a lot of courage for her to do that. One, because she was only a Spanish speaker, mm-hmm. so that by itself might give her this idea that her voice is not considered the same. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her, ma'am, so what is it that you're opposed to? Are you opposed to the fact to just getting apartments in that area in general, mm-hmm. or is it just increasing the density because it was already zoned for so many apartments and they wanted, say, to double it? And she didn't know what to do. She turned to her husband. She got nervous, and I feel bad because that's really prevalent in our community. Mm-hmm. Part of it might be also the gender difference. When you're a woman, mm-hmm. you're a little more reluctant to voice your own opinion or have your own opinion. Or if you're a Spanish speaker only, you also feel that you might not be considered in the same way. So that's why I encourage anyone to learn if you can. I understand that it can be a big financial burden to go on to law school. But any opportunity that you can learn for advocacy, for how to defend to know your rights. There's a lot of organizations in our community. ACLU is the first one that comes to mind. Mm-hmm. That does a good job of going out to the community mm-hmm. to educate people about what their rights are. So that's just a little bit.
Well, that's very important. Now, the idea of advocacy must have been taught to you, or ingrained in you, or helping people use their voices. Where did that come from in your own upbringing? Because you don't just kind of, well, maybe you inherit it in some cases innately, but also things around you teach you that lesson. Were your parents advocates, or did they teach you advocacy? Or
not necessarily. necessarily. I feel that it might be being a first generation.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of my parents was born on this side. My mother was born in Matamoros, and
Mm-hmm.
my father was born in Russia. But
There's an interesting combination.
Right?
Right. And you live in Brownsville, right? That's
Correct.
lovely.
Yes. And I grew up Jewish when it's a predominantly Catholic
Exactly.
population.
Yeah.
But I think most first generation American citizens will identify with when you have to take on the role for your parents
Mm-hmm.
to defend for them.
Mm-hmm. So now you have a bachelor's degree from a wonderful school, Stanford, in international relations and Spanish literature. So you have a strong liberal arts background. And then you go to SMU in Dallas for a law degree.
Correct.
And so now you have all that comes with that and the power now to become an advocate. And you're not done yet. I mean, you want to go back to school again. So where did you go for your third degree?
I went to the University of Texas at Austin.
Finally, you found your way to the Longhorns.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, that was part of the deciding factor.
Uh-huh.
I felt like I was one of the few Texans that had never lived in Austin, and so many other people have. So I was in my early 30s, and I thought, I really need an MBA. And the older I get, the harder it's going to be to go back to school. So my sister was getting married and moving back to Brownsville. I applied to different business schools, and one of the ones that I applied for was UT at Austin. And I got a full ride scholarship, so who's to say no?
No kidding. Just to get into the McCombs Business School is a big deal.
Well, and so that's another thing that I always advocate for females, because
Yes.
more women need to be attending business school.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, and I think still, it's about a 25%. Only 25% of the student population at an MBA program is female. And those are also skills that are very helpful in day-to-day life. Learning how to navigate teamwork, strategic thinking, marketing.
Networking, yes, absolutely.
So, and I always promote the consortium. They targeted minorities, but I think since then they've opened it up. It's not based on race. They make it more affordable. So, and they have many different schools in this consortium that offer financial aid for people that they think are worthy.
UT Austin has just started a brand new endowment for students who are whose parents make less than, I think it's now $70,000. They can go undergraduate without tuition costs at all. UTRGV has said we up the challenge up to $75,000. Well, of course, in the Valley, we're not going to have a whole lot of people that right now make that amount of money. Mm-hmm. But right now, you can go tuition free to both UTRGV or to UT Austin if your parents make less than $70,000. That's extraordinary. I mean, it's wonderful.
And the UT system offers you really good quality education. They're world-renowned.
It does.
So it opens doors to everywhere.
I agree with you for all the reasons we know. So now you're armed with yet another degree, now an MBA from another very respectable school, UT Austin McCombs School of Business. So now you're well armed. And so you graduate. I'm sure your parents are thinking, "Ya, mijita, is this it?"
My parents never understood why I liked school so much because they didn't like it. And so they thought I was the anomaly.
Well, okay, but to their benefit,
yes.
right? So now you finish a business school, and you have to make a decision about where are you going to go, because you could have gone anywhere. You're very marketable now.
I came back to Brownsville for 4 months because it was 2008, right as the real estate. During my time at Austin, my focus in the MBA was real estate finance, and I graduated in 2008, right as the real estate market tanked. So I came back to Brownsville for a bit, and I remember it was in November. I got a phone call from a lawyer I used to work with when I was an attorney practicing in Dallas. And he said, "Hey, would you like to interview for a prosecutor position here in the juvenile court?" It just so happened I had trip to Austin planned for the following week. And I said, okay, let's do it next week. I'm already driving up to Austin. May as well, just head all the way up to Dallas. And that's how I've lived my life. Opportunities kind of present themselves, and I'm okay with it and see where it goes. So I interviewed, and a few weeks later, I guess I got the phone call saying that I was accepted. I didn't even negotiate my salary. Don't ever do that.
First one's there.
Yes. I just accepted, and I said, okay, well, I'll have to drive up like in 2 weeks to find some place to live. But, and I did it. I moved back, and I lived there from 2009 to 2012. It was 3.5 years again in Dallas. This time it was only working though, representing CPS as a prosecutor. Before
CPS is
Child Protective Services,
and that's a tough area to practice in. It's got to be. It must reach into your brain power, all the rational parts of your brain, and into your heart every day.
So it goes to show how I've always been rather spontaneous about the course of my life. When I graduated law school, there were want ads like at the end of emails by the Career Center. And so I started working for an employment lawyer. And he's the one who suggested that I sign up at the juvenile courts because I was bilingual and they were in need of Spanish-speaking lawyers. So they started me out by having me represent juvenile delinquents. And then slowly I started getting CPS cases. And because I was fluent, I ended up getting more cases. So that's, I'm going through law school, or even if it were not for that one lawyer who suggested that I sign up for the juvenile courts, I would have never even entered into that field. And so
but they needed you.
Yeah, and I ended up dedicating, I'd say about 8 years in that field of law that otherwise I probably wouldn't have been exposed to.
Well, for some reason, the powers that be wanted you to have that very difficult experience to understand, because sometimes we grow up in pretty insulated environments. We think the whole world has two parents, the whole world can have choice in which schools they go to, and that's not the case. And you learned that, I'm sure, from that very difficult work.
One of the first cases that I had was a 13-year-old who was in detention, like in juvenile detention, and he was about to get out. But then he messed up again. He violated one of the conditions or something. And it didn't take long to realize that he was doing it intentionally. He had nothing to come out to. His father was on death row for killing someone. His mother was a drug addict and had been out of his life for a while. So he and his siblings were living with his grandparents in a bad part of Dallas, struggling to control the kids. And so for him, it was a lot better to be locked up because there was structure.
There's food.
Yes.
Camaraderie. Yeah. Interesting.
And so I think knowing him immediately made me more sensitive to other people's plights.
To the reality of their lives that are so tough that we're often not exposed to until it hits us right between the eyes. It happens to many of us, and it's actually a blessing, as hard as it is to go through it, right? Because, again, it guides you toward a life that's meaningful and purposeful. So now you've made it through the terrible bubble of 2008 by staying away and working and doing important work.
Correct.
And now, how are you drawn back to Brownsville? What happened?
Actually, so right before I went to business school, my father had a heart attack, and then then 5 years later, when I was living in Dallas, he had a stroke. My sister by then was living here with her husband, and she had a baby. And so once my father had the stroke, my mother and Alter, who you know, kept telling me, like, when are you going to come back? When are you, like, your future's not in Dallas, like you should come back to Brownsville, until circumstances were such that that the timing was right. And so I gave my notice. It all happened within a very short time span. I gave my notice at work. I sold my house because I had a house then, and I ended a relationship. So,
and came home.
Yeah.
and to have a different role, right? Now the role of daughter, but in a different, an adult daughter, very well prepared to try and take the reins, perhaps, of some of the business interests that your parents had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit to get settled and acclimated to the to being here. I always liked coming to visit. Once my father had the stroke,
Yes.
I would come to Brownsville once a month. So that, because I always wanted my nephew to know me. At that point, my little nephew wasn't born yet. So I always liked the difference between the fast-paced life I had in Dallas, being a prosecutor and all that, and being on my own. And then when I came here, the pace of life is so much slower, and then I was surrounded by family. So that was nice. But it took me a while to get used to the rhythm here in Brownsville. I had been away for 20 years.
Imagine, as young as you are, and you'd already been gone that long.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's fast forward a little bit. So now you make the transition home. You're helping your father and your mother in the business, I'm assuming.
Well,
Or
opened,
no,
yeah.
or no?
Well, yeah. No, I'm.
Are you practicing law, or are you?
No, I've
No.
never practiced here in
Okay.
Brownsville.
Okay.
No. No, I was kind of, yeah. That was another thing. I needed to get back so that I could be around my father more and learn the family business and learn from his experience here in Brownsville. So, but really, I think what opened the door for me was being appointed to PUB.
That was it.
I honestly believe that's what really changed the trajectory of my life.
What did it do?
Well, and I always think it's Deborah Portillo. She was the city commissioner then, and I was on a vacation with a friend in Puerto Rico, and she sends me a text saying, "Hey, do you want to be on a board?" I had no idea what she was talking about, but I said sure, because that's how I am. And so I didn't even have a computer, but I asked my friend, because she says, "You have to submit your application right away." I'm like, okay. So I asked my friend if I can borrow his computer, and I did. And so it took a little bit for them to appoint me, but it honestly was what changed, well, my experience here in Brownsville, because it introduced me to a lot of the organizations that we have here in Brownsville, how things work municipally, and really being able to see how a multi-million-dollar organization is run is a lesson that most people don't get. And so once again, I was privileged, and I didn't abuse that. And I think most of the staff know that if I ask tough questions, it's really more because I want to take advantage and because I really want to know.
Exactly. You want to understand what they're
And so I was lucky to serve on the PUB board for 6 years. And now I had to cut my second term short for the city, but it was a great training ground for what I'm seeing now at the city.
It's a really wonderful story to tell, because we often don't give importance enough to committee service. And that's really how you learn. And you should have to go through that before you sit and make decisions at a higher level, in my opinion, because it teaches you so much more. Humility is one of them, but also it just gives you a background to understand better the complexities of the organization that you're involved in. It would happen to us at the university often when we would get board members who were experienced members of committees before they joined our board, and then some who just walked in the door. Completely different kind of work that we had to do to onboard them, as they say now.
Yes.
Let me get to the. We could talk all day because it's fascinating to hear how you came to this work. But let me get to the consejos now.
Okay.
So I have a group of students here, and they want to hear words of wisdom. Not from me, but from you, and because of your pathway, and because of what you have chosen to do in your life. And so, what do you tell them about their own paths forward? If they say, I'm not as special as Nurith Galonsky was, I may not be able to get into those big schools. I may not be able to become a member of the city commission. What are the consejos you might give them?
Everyone has something to contribute. Everyone has something to add, whether it's your perspective or just your time and your energy. Even just listening to someone is already of great benefit. So everyone has something to contribute. So don't feel that, no, I don't have anything to add. Second, whenever I have a chance to talk to young people, I always say, Take advantage of opportunities that are presented to you. As long as they're legal and you know that they won't have negative consequences, go for it. You might meet new people. You'll hear about new perspectives. You'll hear about different ways of doing things. And just make note of it, because there's no set way to get to the right destination. There's many different ways. And so it's always good to learn from others, from their experiences. And that's why the trajectory of my life is all mere coincidence, because the way I ended up practicing child welfare law was by someone's suggestion. The way I ended up even applying to Stanford. So I went to a doctor's appointment with Dr. Zabaleta, and he suggested Stanford. I don't think it was even in my radar. I don't know if I had even heard of it. And so my life has been a series of those things. And you just have to go in with the attitude that you're going to make it work. I remember getting to Stanford. I had never seen the school, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?
Beautiful campus. Fantastic. But a bit intimidating, I guess.
And I always envisioned myself going to New England. So all of a sudden I'm in California. And so even this last time that I moved back to Dallas to become a prosecutor, I remember the second day I had a mediation where the parent was an AIDS survivor, but they had to negotiate plans for how to deal with her child in case something were to happen. And I kept thinking, no one in law school who graduated with me is having to deal with these issues. But you just make it work.
And thank goodness you were.
Yeah. So and that's my attitude about everything. Once I'm there, I need to make it work. So, but they're all learning experiences. They make you who you are. They teach you how to make better decisions, and how to gain more from each experience. Another thing that I'm telling when I speak to the youngest, like when I go to elementary schools or middle schools, read a lot. I know that we now live in an age where technology is everything. And my nephews, they don't read, they just watch videos. But you need to read to be able to appreciate language, whatever language you speak. Be able to express yourself. This whole text speak or text writing, that is not appropriate. There's a time and a place for everything. And you need to really excel in life. I think you need to be a good writer, be able to express yourself. When I represented juvenile delinquents, sadly, there were many times when I would represent kids who really had no vocabulary. And it's because of it's a lack of education, a lack of exposure. And your chances are very limited if you can't express yourself. So those are the three things.
Those are wonderful, Nurith. Thank you so much. Thank you again for taking time to be so candid and authentic with us. I know, in our professions, we're often not asked to speak personally, but you have crossed that barrier, and you have been very candid with us, and I appreciate that very much. And I think our listeners will learn a great deal from your words. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you for tuning in to Next Generation, a program highlighting the next generation of leaders in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond.